Welcome back, viewers. I just got finished watching the mid-season premiere of The Walking Dead, Season 4. Oh, sure. Let me tell you, it wasn't the most exciting thing I've ever seen. Not by a long shot. To be fair, it starts off somewhat strong. We get to see definitively that the governor is indeed dead. You see the gunshot wound in his forehead. He is dead. So all the people that thought, oh, the governor's coming back, he's not. He's dead. He's gone. Governor go bye-bye. Governor not coming back. Then we move on to seeing Herschel's severed head having turned, just sitting there just gaping open, just And that part, man, I was so bummed when Herschel died, so I was pretty bummed to see him die again. You know, Mercy killed by Michonne's sword. So that part kind of struck a chord with me. So it starts off strong there, you know, you get a little bit of resolution, then you see, alright, we're going to see what happens with Michonne after the whole events of the mid-season finale, and also find out what's going to happen with Rick and Carl as they're, you know, off together, father and son. But the episode does not really deliver, and it's unfortunate, because I feel like the character-centric episodes are usually some of the better ones. You know, when we had Clear with Morgan coming back into the fold, that was a great one. I felt like even though the governor-centric episodes were a little bit slow, they still gave you a lot more than what this episode did. So I'll start off with Rick and Carl. Basically, Rick's still treating Carl like a kid, despite the fact that he showed himself pretty capable, and Carl's just acting like an asshole. I think it's funny because it's just like night and day. You know, all of Season 4, Carl's finally listening and not running off and not being a jackass like he's his father's right-hand man. But obviously after the events of the prison being destroyed by the governor and Judith being presumed dead, you know, he's kind of gone back to his old ways and just tries to one-up Rick and tries to let Rick know that, you know, he doesn't need him anymore and he can do all this stuff on his own. He's better than Rick. And, you know, it kind of starts off alright. It's like, okay, I can buy this. This seems like a sensible reaction for what happened. So basically they find an abandoned house. They stay there, they're gathering supplies, and even Carl has to say, like, oh, I win, I got more supplies than you. So he's kind of just being a jerk. But he's sitting there walking backwards and leading two zombies away, which I have no idea what his plan was, why he wouldn't just shot them over there, and obviously he backs up right into another zombie who didn't see that coming, and so they all dogpile on him. He has to fight his way out, waste most of his ammo, and then later on he goes to another house, and he's looking for supplies, and, you know, again, he still thinks he's a badass. So you think he would have learned his lesson from right there, but he doesn't. So he goes into another house, and basically encounters more walkers who pretty much just like, I don't know, he just can't handle them. And, you know, I mean, it's just kind of funny, because, I mean, up to this point, Carl's just headshot everybody, you know, been a pretty much expert marksman, and now all of a sudden he's stumbling over himself. Just to make the point, basically, long story short, he learns the valuable lesson that, oh, I do need you after all, Dad, and blah, blah, blah. Like, seriously, I think it's ironic that the episode was entitled After. That honestly felt like an after-school special. And I'm not even saying that just to make, like, a really bad pun. Like, it really felt like an after-school special, where it's just like, I've learned that it's really important to listen to my parents, and I won't run off anymore. So, you know, he has this monologue, I think after the first Walker encounter, where he's just yelling at Rick, like, oh, it's your fault, everyone died, and blah, 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 you're the reason why Mom died, you couldn't protect her, I don't need you anymore. And part of that even throws a jab in there, like, hey, what about that Shane guy, you remember him? So, I don't know, I get what they're doing in the episode, I respect them for it, but I don't know, the actor that plays Carl, no offense to him, I just feel like he didn't really have the acting chops to carry it off. Like, the scene that should have been emotional when he's going off on Rick just, to me, felt very, very flat. So, obviously, at the end, they reconcile, and he thinks Rick is going to turn, which he looks very much like that's going to be the case, and he's just kind of, like, moaning and reaching towards Carl, and Carl has his gun out, and he's just like, you know, no, I can't do it, and he starts crying. And basically finds out, oh, great, I'm glad I didn't shoot because my dad is still alive. He's just in a lot of pain. So Rick also turns the other leaf, tells Carl, you know, he apologizes for treating him like a kid. You know, he's a man. He can't just, you know, he's been through so much. He's matured in a very short amount of time, so he deserves more respect. Despite the fact that, ironically, in the same episode, he showed just how immature he actually still is. So that was one half of After. The other half is very Michonne-centric, and in this, pretty much Michonne graduates from the typical Michonne scowl to now the Michonne quivering lip, because that seems to be her face for the majority of this episode. And we get to go back and see more of her past. And quite honestly, I wish we didn't. I mean, everything that we pretty much learned in this episode was more or less implied in previous episodes. You know, she had a kid. The two walkers that she had with the arms chopped off and the jaws off were people that she cared about. We found out now that one was her lover, and they just had to throw it out there as blatant as possible. And I'm assuming the other guy was either his friend or his brother or something. I don't know. But either way, she has this weird, like, surreal dream flashback sequence, and they're sitting there and she's chopping up whatever, and the worst part was, like, well, there's a lot of bad parts, but she puts the katana in the little knife thingamajig, and it's just stupid. Like, I understand it's surreal, I understand it's supposed to be a dream sequence, but that just took me out of that. I'm like, this is dumb. And then just, like, the little aside is like, you've gotten really good with the sword, Michonne. Like, it would have been nice if they were like, okay, how? Like, did she already know how to use a sword? Where did she get the sword? Like, I would have rather have seen the origin of how Michonne and her sword were united than see this weird, surreal bullshit with, I don't know, her lover and lover's acquaintance and son. And they don't even explain, it's like the vague of her talking to herself, like, had only you've done this thing, then he'd still be alive and you'd still be alive, and it just wasn't good. They already did this with her getting the baby from Beth and starting to cry. We know that, obviously, she probably had a child. You know, like I said, they already addressed the origins of the walkers. And her acting in this episode was so bad. Like, I felt like her and Carl were just like, they were competing to see which one could produce the worst, like, dramatic performance. And it's a toss-up because they were both pretty poor. So, at the end of the episode, she finds the can of pudding that Carl had been nomming on. And then she finds the house where they're at, and they all get reunited, and it's so happy and warm fuzzies. And, you know, I'm actually glad that they did reunite, because it didn't make any sense to me during the season finale how she just helped save Rick from the governor, and then she just kind of wanders off. They're obviously in the same vicinity, so I thought it was good that they got to that point. And again, I won't go as far as to say I hated this episode, but I felt like it could have been a lot stronger, and I felt like they could have shortened it a lot. It just felt like it was really dragged out, very slow, just to kind of bring you to an inevitable conclusion, and unnecessary backstory was thrown in there. So that's how I felt about After. I didn't care for it too much. Ironically, one of my friends had posted something on Facebook about it being really boring. I'm like, nah, it's people say about The Walking Dead, it's probably not that boring. Then I watched it, and I was just like, it's probably the worst episode of The Walking Dead that I've ever seen. And that's saying a lot, since a lot of people really didn't care for at least the first half of season 2, but I thought this was the worst. And I guess the most disappointing thing is just that most of season 4 has been so good. I understand that they needed kind of this epilogue episode to kind of patch things together, but I don't know. They just hit the ground running, you know, early on, and then I felt like now this is just like such a whimper and such a step in the wrong direction. So basically, this episode not very good. I mean, I think it had a lot of potential, but one, I felt like the actors' performances really couldn't carry it, and just overall, what they chose to put in it, I don't know, just the writing was weak. I think the concept was good, but the execution was poor, and it just kind of just fell just flat on its ass, essentially. But I still have a lot of faith for the rest of the season. A lot of good things seem like they're going to happen, so I'm still excited. And as always, thanks for watching. You know, you can subscribe, or you can go to Pitwar, PTWOR, or Punching the Walls Reality, or subscribe to the video, or subscribe to our YouTube. You know, the more subscribers we get, I don't know, it does something. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. So subscribe, leave comments if you have any suggestions. You know, I made the predictions video based solely off of suggestions, so if you have any suggestions or anything you want to see, let me know, and I will do my best to facilitate that. Until then, see you later.